kleptomaniac vandalizer of my property. Fucking with the dick. My deceased husband. You piece of shit.
So, because my story contains so much information, and I had to do research, and there were various steps legally that I had to take, this stories is going to appear in a series. So, this is part one. So, my story with the neighbor from hell began in August of 2023, which is last year. So, just for context, today is December 31st of 2024. It took over a year for me to really get what I would consider legal justice and an appropriate response to stalking and harassment. The situation was really made worse because this wasn't someone that would follow me around when I left my house. This person is actually a neighbor, and they live in close proximity to me. So you're talking about a daily dose of instability, trauma, harassment, and just chaos for over a year. I would like to say that I would say 90% on the other side of this issue, because I was able to get the legal system, the criminal justice system locally, to actually respond in what I would consider an appropriate manner. So I won't share certain personal details because I don't want to include certain people's whose identity I do want to keep private, because I do not have their permission to use their names or anything like that. But I think that my particular side of it is animated and filled with enough information to give you a good idea of what I had to deal with. And that if you ever encounter this, what are some signs of a neighbor that is stalking, and that the situation is going from a temporary thing to something that is going to need a permanent resolution. So, again, my situation with my neighbor began August 2023. Now, I've lived in this particular neighborhood now, it will be 11 years. And I moved here because it is a quiet subdivision. It's relatively quaint. Many of my neighbors are either in military active duty or retired, and for the most part, it's middle class. So folks are either working or retired, and we were looking for and have a place of peace and stability. Everyone is very friendly, very hospitable. People do mind their business, but if you need help, it's easy to ask for help and get it. So it came as a surprise to me after 10 years of being here that there's a neighbor that honestly I had never seen. I actually thought that the house was that no one lived there because I never saw anyone come out. So I was unfamiliar with the person, but after COVID was over and people began, going outside and doing the things and enjoying sunlight and the ability again to communicate and travel more freely, I guess this neighbor resurface. I guess they reintroduce themselves to the world. So, anyway, I never interacted with this neighbor. It was intentional and it was by choice. Because what I noticed about her is her behavior was just very chaotic. Like, there was always loud music coming from her car. She would leave her car and music on literally for like hours during the day. If she spoke to anyone outside, even if it was the male lady, you could hear her from her house all the way like down the street. Everything was loud, everything was dramatic, everything was animated. So for me, I'm not I'm not into that. I don't like a lot of dramatics around me. Um Over the last, starting in 2020, as I went through a separation and a divorce, I worked really hard to live a life of peace, safety, and stability in like every area. So I'm not the type of person that have women around me that are just, their lives are filled with drama and chaos. And it was like she was always outside. She was always talking to everyone that passed by. And I was just like, okay, so this is different. So this isn't the quiet, peaceful neighborhood that I wanted to live in. So fast forward. In August, a significant event happened. I met a neighbor. We befriended each other and we began going out. I'll just say that. Having a really good time. It had been 3 years since I had actually gone out and did anything without my ex-husband, right? So I was feeling pretty good. I had lost weight. I was at the healthiest I had been in like 5 or 6 years. Then the chaos came. So apparently with this person, I was a problem and she needed to get rid of me. That included, mostly it began with her speaking disparaging things and misinformation about me to some of the other neighbors. I had kind of found out about it, but again, I'm a person, I live in relative peace. I'm raising children, and if anyone knows me, I'm busy doing my thing, living my life. I have no time to mind the business that is not mine. So anyway, as I continue to live my life and go out and just have a good time, the talking to neighbors about me disparaging in a disparaging way, and trying to discredit me, turned into her verbally saying things out of her mouth when I would go outside. Again, not the biggest issue, because sometimes your mouth will write a check that your ass can't cash. And for me, I pretty much, saw it as very early on someone who was filled with jealousy and envy. And one of the things that this situation taught me, which I had already known as a woman in my mid 40s, people are always watching you. People are always watching. So apparently, not only had she been watching me, like from the time I leave my house to the time I get home, if I was going out with the other neighbor. I mean, she was texting people like the hours I would leave home and come back, what I was doing, what I was wearing, what time I would leave the neighbor's house that I was going out with. I mean, it was just a whole mess. So at this point, I'm like, okay, this is a stalker. Like, this woman is watching my every move. Okay. So again, I didn't totally lose peace at that because, again, people have the right to observe and everything, and things were still, what I would say, I was still, again, feeling that I was in a place of safety and security and stability. So, what then happened was, and I remember it, I was going out with a friend and we were going to the movies. The stalking neighbor literally watched us pull out of the driveway, and she basically followed the car we were in until we got to a separate intersection. And I said, okay, she is on one, and if she's on one, I need to be on two or three, because I need to be ahead of her, because she's clearly unstable. She's clearly persistent. So let me begin to be a little bit more watchful of when my children walk outside, when I leave for work, and when I come in. So fast forward, the verbal harassment turned from her just, saying things out loud like, oh, she thinks she's cute, or what does she have that I don't have, to her directly speaking to me. And one day, as I was walking, she called and said, hey, I need you to stay off my yard. Again, I had never been to, I was not on her property. I didn't even speak to her. I didn't even wave. So I knew basically what she was trying to do is, so basically the harassment, verbal harassment, continued to be amped up with her, trying to discredit me with other neighbors, saying things when I walked outside. And again, I'm a person, I felt like, any normal, average functioning person, if you ignore someone and you don't give them attention, then what you feel like is going to happen is they're going to get the hint that you don't want anything to do with them, that you're not going to play into it, and they just kind of leave you alone. Well, again, her persistence was just there. And the frequency in which the harassment um, turned into a daily thing was just, it began to get to me. And one day, as I was walking to another neighbor's house to just kind of hang out for the evening, she was just outside. She was acting really sporadic and her behavior was chaotic. So between me walking from my house a few feet to another neighbor's house, she was frantically, she was cussing, using all kind of profanity. I was a bee, I was a hoe. I mean, it had just gotten really bad. And I still didn't respond. And her words were, I will beat your ass with this bat. And she had a bat in her hand and she started walking towards me, and her son had to grab her and stop her. And it was at that moment that everything turned to another level for me. I knew that she was communicating threats. I didn't know whether or not she would follow through. She seemed mentally unstable enough too. And I said, okay, we have to take this to the next level. It was at that time that I called 911. The police showed up. There was actually a detective that came out. He took the police report. He tried to go over and speak to her. She, of course, as all cowards and bullies do, she didn't answer the door. And I explained to him how long the situation had been going on. And he recommended that I go press charges. I said, how do I do that? Now, I had never been through this. So I thought that once you filed a police report, then, and you have a witness there to verify what happened, you could just tell the police that you want to press charges. That is not how it happens. The next step that I had to do was go down to the magistrate's office. In my county, that office is located inside our local detention center. So I'll get into that at another time, because that would be going into part 2, because this is kind of like a quarterly thing. So everything started in August, and by this point, there's my August, September. This happened in October, right? So I go down to the magistrate's office. There's a judge there. So there are judges to cover the magistrate's office for 24 hours. So I had to complete a form, which I will talk about later. It's a form. Hopefully I can bring it up online, or I will just share a redacted copy of mine. But I had to explain verbally first to the magistrate with what happened. If they feel like it's a valid reason to press a charge, what they will do is then have you write everything out. So you're going to put your identifying information, as much as the identifying information for the person that you're pressing charges against, and write out exactly what happens, what was said, all of that. At the end of it, she did grant me pressing charges for the neighbor communicating threats. So once that happened, the magistrate sets a court date. So the neighbor had to be served with the charge by the police. So she wasn't arrested, but we got a court date. And that's the beginning of part 2. Because again, you would think any normally functioning person with a state job would not want to jeopardize any of that. Well, honey, I guess everybody's different. So stay tuned next week for part 2 of when I go over some of the steps that I had to take after pressing charges, and once we had a court date set. So again, this is the resource-filled woman. This is my story. Use it for the good. I'm just here trying to help somebody. Peace and prosperity.